We have a new name. We've got a podcast name now.
Finally settled on a name after lots of back and forth.
Yeah, we couldn't decide. We kept talking about something with coffee in it, but I don't drink coffee, and we've never really drunk coffee on the show.
And so what were some of the ones that we came up with? So I'm sure, can we mention this? If we're saying that we're not using it, obviously. So Freudian Sips, that was something that Megan came up with, but then we found out that was already a podcast, so...
And I don't like Freud. Sorry. That's it. We'll talk about Freud in a later episode, I'm sure.
And we sort of psychobabble, because it's like a term for kind of when you sort of say things as if you know about things and it's got some kind of scientific merit without actually having the facts. So we thought that would be quite ironic, because obviously we're all about evidence. Yeah. But that was taken.
It was taken, yeah. We did look at it and we're like, well, have they maybe just not done an episode in a while? But, yeah.
Do you want to reveal our name?
You can, go on.
But now I'm worried that I'm going to say it wrong, like the one that we've actually decided on. So, the Coventry Cortex.
The Coventry Cortex. The Coventry Cortex. We decided on that because it's straightforward, and it includes the fact that we're here at Coventry University, and it's Cortex, it's brainstem. So yes, we'll have to make like a backdrop or something.
I think so. Yeah.
We'll get us settled into a room and we'll get a backdrop. But yeah. So today's topic, we were going to have a guest today, but then we've had to move because we've had some projects on this week. We were posting about them on the social media at some point soon, actually. But no, the podcast will go out tomorrow, and the social media stuff will probably be like next week. So we were doing projects, so we've had to push back the guest. And so we decided we'd talk about exams. You guys already know the title's going to say exams. So yeah, we were going to talk about exams. I was on the radio a couple of weeks ago, the local radio, talking about it. And we've done some posts about exam anxiety.
I've spoken to a lot of applicants recently in my role as admissions tutor. So possibly some of you guys watching, and you've been telling me about the exams that you're doing as well. So I think depending on where you are with everything, I think some people were halfway through, some people were kind of more at the beginning, depending on the subjects. I remember that at school. Do you remember how some people really looked out on the order, and some people had either they got it out of the way, or they had loads of time spread out so they could revise in between?
I think my GCSE exams were quite well spread out from the top of my memory, because I remember doing like the last day I had an exam, so they must have been quite...
You've just reminded me of something as well. So next week we're potentially going to do... We don't know if we're going to do it at the festival, but Alex and I are going to Download Festival, so we might follow up with an episode on sort of like the psychology of music, or we might share some clips from Download. But it's just reminded me that Download Festival, when I was in college, pretty much clashed with the exam period, and I studied for one of my A-level law exams in a tent, and there's a photo of me studying for A-level law, and it's unsurprising to say that actually I did not do very well in that exam.
If you can find that picture, I'd love to see it. I'll edit it in if you can get it to me by tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I'll see.
If you don't see the picture right now, then editing Alex didn't get a copy of the picture. So revising in a tent. So I imagine it probably wasn't the best revision.
No. And I think of all my law exams, I definitely had to resit that one. So I'm thinking it would have been like an AS exam. It wouldn't have been sort of like, something that kind of implicated my final kind of grades. But I think I did have to resit it. So
speaking of AS exams, do you want to know something ironic? I failed psychology. I failed AS psychology.
And you were here
and I'm still here, psychology lecturer Alex. I failed it. So I did sociology, philosophy, psychology, and religious theology. And I failed psychology and philosophy. We had a problem with philosophy that year that everybody failed, and the teacher was like, there was a problem. And so we had the option of dropping it or whatever, and I was like, well, I'll drop philosophy because we've had a bad start, and I'll resit psychology, because at the time I was really into philosophy, and I was like, well, I'll redo psychology because I'm still interested in it. And then I worked a lot with my I'm a teacher at the time, loads of revision papers, and I was getting like really good marks on the practice papers, and then I redid the exam and I didn't get anywhere near as good. But I've always been, I don't know about you, I've always been like a straight B student.
That's amazing. So, I mean, we're going to talk about this a bit today, aren't we? Like whether or not exams actually test what we think they're testing. And obviously at Coventry, we don't have any exams. We spend a lot of our time thinking about kind of like pedagogical sort of like practice and what gets the best out of our students. And we know that exams test very specific things like, you know, coping under pressure, memory, those kind of things. So we would much prefer to see students do like a portfolio of coursework and to really sort of like show their strengths. Ironically, having espoused this message and completely agreeing with it, I would actually say that I'm pretty good at exams.
Yeah, I think I was all right at them.
The reason I say that with kind of like a wincy face is basically I used to be the student that everyone kind of loved to hate a bit because I would procrastinate, not necessarily do the revision I was supposed to do, cram it all last minute and then ace it in an exam because it's essentially a bit of a memory test. And one of the most famous examples in my friends group is that I also did philosophy. In our second year, I remember not being particularly engaged with the teacher and probably not maybe studying as much as I should have done. The night before the exam, I went to go hang out with my friends and my friend was also doing the exam. And I was like, oh, just take me through your revision notes. Just tell me what you've learned and I'll just listen to it. I listened to what she was doing and I came out with exactly the same mark as her and she's hated me ever since for that. It's been a total bugbear because she'd spent weeks digesting the text, doing all that. I just got her to parrot it to me and I just learned it I suppose and just kind of like memorised it. So that does just go to show that exams are not testing really well.
Yeah, if you got good memory you do well. I mean I got recognised by some of the staff at my old university when I was doing my undergrad, and it set me up for being a lecturer actually, which is like advice for people in general for learning. My thing when I was in my first year of my undergraduate degree was I used to book out like one of the social rooms we had in halls and I would put out a post to everybody in my year and go, I'm going to go through the lecture slides on the TV we've got there, like a little clicker, and we're going to go through it as like a class, a revision class. And I would run it and try and explain it, but it was always set up of a case of, but if I get something wrong, you guys have to tell me it's wrong or re-explain it. So it ended up being like a group thing. But I basically ended up running like seminars, like revision seminars in like one of the social rooms. And the staff ended up picking up on it. But I always found that I learn really well when I'm having to teach and explain it to somebody.
We do. So when I was in Centre for Global Learning, Education and Attainment, so GLE, that sort of, it still exists as one of our kind of research centres, I was involved in a peer-assisted learning project which basically uses that exact process. So peer-assisted learning is basically the idea when you take a skilled learner and you pair them with either someone with kind of equal or normally it would be someone that's maybe isn't quite as proficient in a certain area. We do it a lot with kids and literacy, so you'll take a skilled reader and a less skilled reader. And in the programme, typically, you know, one will take lead with reading and the other one will kind of give feedback. So it might be that the less skilled reader does the reading and then the more skilled reader kind of like tutors them, talks them through it, explains it. But what we would find from some of the studies that we would run and what the literature tends to say is that not only is that process beneficial for the less skilled child or kind of like learner, less skilled, you know what I mean, kind of less proficient, but it's also incredibly beneficial for the person doing the tutoring and the mentoring because you're essentially taking information that is to begin with relatively implicit and you're making it explicit. And it follows something that we call the RR model. So Carmeloff Smith has the redescriptional kind of, it's called like the RR model basically, and it's essentially where you take information from an implicit level of understanding right through to that kind of explicit, and it's only when you get to explicit that you're more representational redescription, I couldn't remember the title for a second, and you take it to that very sort of like explicit level when you are then able to explain it to somebody else, and that's when you've got the most proficient level of knowledge. But yeah, there's loads of studies that look at peer-assisted learning and the benefit of it.
It reminds me a bit of Vygotsky as well. The idea of scaffolding and zone and proximal development, and there'll be something that I know that I can share to somebody else that's on that zone, and there's something somebody else knows that I'm in that zone for, like, ready to learn it, but it's just not quite there. And the more people you have, the more people that you've got to fill in that. Like, if you've got a teacher that you can kind of go, well, your teacher just knows it all, that's super efficient. You don't need as many people. But if you are, like, studying with friends, the more that you've got, the more opportunities you have to kind of bridge those gaps, which I think is always useful.
It is, and we do a lot of that kind of stuff at Coventry anyway. So our current students amongst you guys will know this, and potentially, like, students that are thinking of coming along, like, we do a lot of seminar group activities where we kind of do this sort of almost peer assisted learning framework, and yeah, it's super important. And I think another thing probably worth mentioning is that the way that we teach our postgrad and our undergraduate courses are also slightly different to a lot of other universities, in that we have, like, block delivery. So we actually will have students starting at slightly different points within the year. So it could be that you've got one student who has started a module for September, but then come November you get a few more students joining. They're on the same qualification, but they're also in the classroom with those who have already done a module before. And one of the great things that peer assisted learning and this kind of sort of scaffolding approach can do is that we then have two groups of students essentially that can kind of communicate and talk to each other, and it gives the opportunities for the students who are there longer to actually talk a little bit about what they've done. It then re-cements their learning, prepares the students who are then going to do that module at some point later on. And yeah, I think it's kind of a really good way of sort of creating that kind of learning community.
Yeah. The blocks as well. So they're 6 weeks, so it's half a semester. And so they rotate. So instead of 2 semesters, it's typical university, and the third is summer, we've instead got these 6 blocks that go one after another, but you can start in any of those 6 blocks.
Yeah.
It depends on the course you do, because I know with the master's students, they always start in the same block, which is one that I've been running for a while, is the project plan and ethics. Everybody starts there, and then block 2, it's essentially, well, what module is running at that block that all students will do at some point in what we call the carousel. So if anybody's not sure what a block is, it's just like this rotating set of classes. So you might start in your first semester, you're doing social psychology, and then somebody starts the next semester, well, their first module might be biological psychology, and they'll do social psychology the last thing, because it cycles through these modules over and over. And like you said,
so you only ever do one module once. I probably made it sound like you're repeating things like several times over, but yeah, so you come around in a full circle. It's just where you join the journey that's slightly different. But
and that accessibility is good. I mean, my old job, I used to work in an international college, and what we'd oftentimes get, we get students that would join us, because we'd have an intake in September and an intake in January, and we had a load of students join us in January, and we'd kind of be like, why are so many first year students starting in January? And we'd ask them. A really common answer was, oh, well, I missed the cut-off point for September, so this was the soonest point that I could get started on the degree. And some students also went, well, for like money as well, was if I started in September, I'd have like the summer block where I'd have to basically figure out how I'm going to live. I'm not in classes, maybe I can get a job, but what if I can't? So they went, okay, well, what if I just don't start university for 3 months, start in January, and then as soon as I finish my first year, I've got like 2 weeks, and then I start my second year, and there's no need to worry about how I'm going to like bridge that gap. And so having like this block system means that there's a lot more accessibility for people that either want to speed up the process, for like condense down the time between those semesters and so on. But also, like, if you end up missing a cut-off, I think you'd mentioned that you had like a gap year. Yeah,
so I was going to come back to that. So coming back to this idea of sort of like exam stress and kind of like what it takes out of you, I remember having a gap year, but the reason probably was because after all of that cramming for exams, because I was probably terribly unprepared and did it all over that kind of sort of like final block, by the time we kind of got to sort of September, I was thinking, I'm exhausted, I cannot go to university now. And I imagine that it's probably the same for a lot of you guys, like, or could have been the same. So you get to September, and I think I ended up taking a gap year, not because I wanted to be off for a whole year, because certainly by probably about the spring of the next year, I was bored and really ready to go to university. And I think if I'd have had this system where I could have just jumped on slightly later and had a bit of a breather, it would have been really helpful. But yeah.
I just went straight across. I was just like, sign me up for more. I wanted to move. I wanted to get away from England, and I moved to Wales. And I was like, right, I'm hours away. I'm by the seaside. I'm by the mountains. So yeah, it was okay for me. But yeah, I mean, exams are always, like we were saying, they're weird because like some people just do better at them, and I think that's one of the issues where you can look at it and go, there's got to be a problem with exams then if some people are just better than others just because. And so like we were saying, your ability to be able to like memorize stuff, because like cognitively we've got lots of different processes that are important, and what we want to do is try and measure how you can use as many of those as possible with the material of the class that you're doing, if you're doing a philosophy class or a psychology class or whatever. And if exams are just pure memory, just long-term memory, how much can you fit in and how much can you get out afterwards? It's one of many things that we care about. And whilst memory is important to any position, you know, you've got to remember what the RR model is. Like, there is always that point that there's other stuff that's needed. I mean, I don't know about you, but I always tell students, I don't care if you remember the name or year of a paper. What I care about is, do you generally know what that paper is about, like the importance of the findings of them. But if you don't remember that this paper was done by Johnson et al. Or whatever, realistically doesn't matter, because you go to like a conference and the amount of been to a conference and speaking to people, and you're like, oh, you mentioned this paper in your talk, and they go, oh yeah, sorry, I've completely forgot who it was. I know the paper, I know what they did. And it's so common to just be like, give me your email address and I'll email you the paper, or like, just search for these keywords and you'll find it on Google Scholar or whatever. That like even real world practice isn't just cram all of these numbers and these dates and these names in your head, because it's more about like, we teach synthesis. Read loads of research and combine them, and what do they generally mean, and how do you make sense of all of that as like a broad idea, rather than exams and just cram it in as much as you can. And I mentioned I failed psychology in first year of college because the exam board that we had, I don't know if you had the same exam board.
I think we had a mixture of AQA and OCR, depending on which grade.
Oh, really?
Not which grade, which subject, but I could be misremembering that. But I swear, like, philosophy was one and psychology was another.
Some colleges, I know in Wales there's one exam board for Wales, but in England there's quite a few. But my exam board for psychology was, I think off the top of my head, 115 different psychology studies from history. And there were stuff like Loftus and Palmer's car crash stuff. I don't remember the name of them. This is what I was saying. Don't remember the name of them. But the London taxis, or the hippocampus enlargement, because they had London
the streets. Oh yeah, because I remember everything. Yeah.
Freud's psychosexual development theory. Loads of studies, and all you had to do was memorise them. 115 studies, and you'd have like 60 MCQs asking you about random studies, and then like 5 or 6 essay questions that would ask you to like. If you're lucky, you might be able to pick one from like cognitive psychology, or they'd be like, tell us about this specific study, tell us about their sample and where they got them from and what they did with them. And it was pure, just cram that in, so much information in. You didn't have to understand a word of it realistically, as long as you could memorise it.
I have so many questions because I feel like this is so different. So this was this your A-levels?
This was A-level, yeah.
I'm trying to think back because I am pushing 40, so my A-levels were quite a long time ago now. And is it a Welsh? I do not remember there being an MCQ. Is it just a Welsh?
I didn't do it in Wales. I went to Wales for university. So it was an English one. I'm pretty sure there were MCQs because they asked us on most of the studies to some degree. But it was only a small handful that they asked us, like, really detailed written one.
Can I ask how old you are now on the podcast?
Yeah, 33. So it was like 2011.
I am old, okay.
It's alright, I was talking to Jake the other day and he's like 27, 28.
Yeah, he is a baby, yeah.
He's 28, he's 5 years younger than me. And I was just like, oh my god. Yeah. Sorry, Jake, if you're watching. I told everybody doxed you.
Oh yeah. So maybe that is just that they changed the format of it, because I mean, it was a while ago, but I'm 99% sure that all of our questions were pretty much just essay based.
Okay.
Some of them were short. Now I'm really sort of dredging memory. Some of them were short answer, but there was definitely no MCQs.
I mean, to be fair, it was like 15 years ago. So I might be like slightly off. I think there was MCQs in there. I actually, thinking about MCQs are actually like, I did like a CPD, Continuous Professional Development, my old university for staff on MCQ design, because we used to use exams over there, and everybody would just be chucking MCQs in because they're just easy to throw in to like boost up marks. So if you had like written questions and you ran your exam and a lot of students are starting to run out of time, the next year you'd probably pull out a written question and replace it with like 5 MCQs to like moderate time, but still be able to cover like breadth of material. Yeah. And so I ended up developing like a hour-long talk exploring MCQs and like how do you design them and stuff. And it is really like, it's kind of interesting, in like the nerdiest way possible. It's kind of interesting to look at like, I don't know if you've ever done this in class, because sometimes we use MCQs in class, which is like guide students. If you give them the option, if you give them 4 options, and then you give them a 5th one that says all of the above or none of the above, there will be a significant number of students that will always select that, because they psych themselves out, and they go, oh, well, by the nature of that option existing, that must therefore be the correct one. There's also other stuff around like how detailed the answers are. So if one answer has way more detail than the others, people will instinctively go to that one.
I used to, and again this is more pure anecdotal kind of like evidence, but there's probably definitely stuff that looks at this as well, but sometimes you can tell what the correct answer is by the grammar of this. So there are probably many ways in which MCQs, did we say multiple choice question? Yeah. So how they must be flawed in kind of, in terms of anxiety, do you reckon they're more anxiety provoking than like the written?
I think less. I don't know 100% sure, I'm pretty sure it's less, because a lot of the issue with written essay answers is trying to build the logic across a wider, like lengthier piece of work. And with multiple choice questions, you know that there is a 1 in 4 chance that you can get it right anyway. With a written question, like, I mean, I did this, you probably did this, I'm sure anybody watching has done this. You will just write garbage if you don't know the answer and just hope maybe you'll pick up. And I advise students to do this, to be fair. If you've got time, if you don't know the answer, leave that question to the end. If you've got time, come back to it at the end and just write whatever you can that you think might be relevant, because I've genuinely given students a couple of marks because I've gone, there are ideas in here that do kind of cross over with what we're looking for, even if it's not the right answer, it's not what we're looking for. Say, for example, you know, we were asking a question on Vygotsky's stuff on zone of proximal development, and you started talking about Freud or something. There's going to be a tiny bit of crossover in terms of just general psychology that you might pick up a mark or two. And it might be a 15-20 mark question. As a percentage, it's very low on that, but that can be the difference between like a pass and a fail. And it's always worth just trying to get something in. But I think that's where a lot of the anxiety comes from, is that like pressure of, oh my god, what do I do? Whereas giving them MCQs, you're being prompted with an answer. I did a little bit during my PhD about the operation span, which is the automated operation span is a working memory task. And I was interested in it because my original PhD topic was exam anxiety, it was test anxiety. The original was Parkinson's, right? My PhD setup was so weird. It was originally going to be working with Parkinson's, and then it got changed to just old people, and then it got changed to test anxiety, and then it ended up being on math anxiety. Figure out that pipeline. We'll talk about it. I said another topic we can do for a podcast is PhDs. My PhD was wild. I finished my PhD early. I submitted my thesis in like less than 3 years. My PhD was weird.
I took 5 years, the maximum. So it doesn't matter how quickly you do it.
No, and it doesn't necessarily mean one of the reasons why mine didn't take as long is because most of my research failed. The theory didn't hold up to the practicality. and it was a lot of writing about why it didn't work, which like that was still a novel contribution. Anyway, so with the idea looking at this operation span is a way to measure working memory, and I was interested in it because specifically it involves doing mathematics equations and storing letters and adding to them and then giving those letters back. So what you do is you give somebody a really easy equation. It'd be something simple in brackets, parenthesis, and then another operation either before and after. So it could be something, for example, like 4 plus brackets 2 times by 3. So you go, okay, 2 times by 3 is 6, and then back to plus 4, answer is 10. Really, really simple. Most people should be able to do it pretty quickly. And then if you get that, whether you get it right or wrong, you then get shown a letter. So it might be the letter L. Then we'll show you another equation, you answer it, and then another letter. It could be the letter R, for example. And you do this a certain amount of times. Some trials you do it 3 times, some 4, 5, 6, or 7. And you only get a working memory score if you get every single equation correct and every single letter remembered and returned correct in like a block, essentially. So it's really difficult. It's a very difficult task. And I was interested in it because, well, it's got math equations in it, so math anxiety should have an interaction with this test and not with other tests. And that's what a lot of my research was based off of, this idea. And we ended up having this issue. To get the original operation span, you had to pay a license fee for it. And I was self-funded. I took a government loan out, a PhD loan from the government, so I didn't have any money to pay for it. So I was like, right, I'm going to make a bootleg version. And I learned how to code, and I made my own version. And it had to be legally distinct. And one of the things is the original one is a multiple choice question. So with the equation, they'd give you 2 answers, and they go, is the answer, is it 9 or is it 10? And you just select one. And I ended up doing it as a free recall. So just, here's a box, write your answer. We're not prompting you what it is. And that was always quite interesting because I never did look at it, but I was always like, there's going to be a difference between this prompted and this free recall. But I always rationalized it as, I'm interested in that equation causing as much anxiety as possible to show that this actually matters and has an impact on working memory. So that free recall version of the task should have been more anxiety inducing than the original task, purely because one is multiple choice and one's free recall. You just tell me, I'm not prompting you, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I'm wondering whether or not the forced decision one would be more, it would have a higher working memory load, simply because not only if you follow the process anyway, I mean, either participants are going to guess, so that is an option, or they're going to go through the process, solve the equation, but then have to online compare that to 2 different options to see which one is correct, before then realising that they also have to remember. So they don't have to remember the answer, they just have to get the answer right.
They've got to, well, they have to remember the answer for when they're answering it, but after that equation's done,
forget it,
whatever.
And it's only the letter they have to remember. Letter, So that whole process might be longer than it would be just to give that free answer as well. So I would have thought that time, that temporal kind of constraint also might have an impact as well.
Possibly. I mean, it's one of those things that we were really playing around with this task because it was a case of we can't afford to do it. But it was an interesting kind of avenue we went down that was challenging this whole exam idea, because the point is it's a test, it's an exam, but it's for cognitive abilities rather than psychology or whatever. But this really careful decision around how much of an impact does it have. I suppose some of that logic is if you have free recall, you could guess any number, and there's only going to be a reasonable amount. The answer is obviously not 15 million, but it could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It could be any of those. Whereas with the prompted multiple choice exam style answer, it's 1 or 2. And they usually had the answers be pretty close to each other, so it was a bit more difficult. But if you knew the answer, you knew the answer. In both scenarios, if you know the answer, you know it. But with people that weren't 100% sure, in the prompted one, they're kind of a bit more nudging them in a direction. Whereas with my free recall version, there isn't really anything to nudge them. It's a case of you got to be sure. If you're not sure,
If you're not sure, then you have to do it. And it's only the letter they have to remember. So that whole process might be longer than it would be just to give that free answer as well. So I would have thought that time, that temporal kind of constraint also might have an impact as well.
if you're not sure,
And did they get any feedback about whether the answer was right or wrong?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's easier to be wrong with free recall than it is with the prompt recall. And I'm wondering whether or not that continual feedback of being only right half of the time from free recall potentially, where it is easier to get it wrong in theory from a chance perspective, that also potentially has a negative impact then on things like anxiety. And it's interesting because it makes you think, if you had exactly the same exam where you either tested it purely with an MCQ, or you in theory took exactly the same content but transposed it into just an essay on or short answers on exactly the same things, how much difference there would be in performance. Because a lot of it, I mean, and this is another thing that we often overlook when it comes down to sort of like exams, a lot of it is also, and I say this to students all the time, how you actually communicate your answer. A lot of it will, I always used to say to students when they were thinking about kind of even sort of like what A levels to choose, one of the best ones that you can choose to do, and I feel really bad if we have students, I didn't choose that, is English language as an A level, because that does an awful lot, and I don't mean English literature either, I mean English language, because it goes into sort of like the nitty gritty of how language is made up, how sentences are structured, the why as well, which I think is really important then for effectively putting it in practice. But there is so much power in being able to write an answer well in a way that then can be understood by the marker. And again, we say this to our students even when they're writing their coursework. If you write something to me that is cohesive and clear and simple and straightforward, and I can easily decipher what your argument is, I'm going to probably give that a better mark, not because it's just qualitatively better, but in terms of my own cognitive processing. I've read a million essays, I've read a million pieces of coursework. I have only got so much processing capacity, and the ones that are written more clearly and better and flow better, those arguments are just going to jump out to me better than the ones that are really cognitively hard for me to decipher because the language is just simply not as good. If I'm spending all of my cognitive resources just trying to decipher what is written, I don't have enough processing power left over to actually see the wonderful arguments that you've made on the page. And I think a lot of that comes into it. So unfortunately, exams can be a bit rubbish for that. I mean, I suppose you could argue that coursework is the same, I suppose, but you've got more time to kind of refine it, get help from stuff like we have the Centre for Academic Writing, for example, and get support with those kind of things. But in an exam, you're essentially on your own. You've got to kind of like phrase it like, you know, pretty quickly. And sorry, I'm going off on one now. When I did my undergraduate, because I had exams for my undergraduate, I kid you not, one of the years where we did an exam, I think that our lecturer might have just been a little bit frustrated with life. Not only did he mark our scripts, but he gave us a little paragraph each at the end which ranked how good our handwriting was and whether or not he could actually understand what we'd said.
I get the idea of being like, I can't read. I've had to do this before in exams and gone, I truly cannot read this. And what I tend to do is I tend to give the benefit of the doubt and look for, like, if I can see keywords in there that I know are relevant to the answer, I'll assume what you're writing probably makes sense. Mm-hmm. But it's so difficult, and I know that there's a lot of people that won't do that. So it's always like I'd never recommend, if your handwriting's messy, don't worry, somebody will probably be nice about it. I know some true people that will be horrible about it. Mm-hmm. But to give a rant and
he even posted a message out via email to all of us before we got this back saying that he was going to make this comment on all of our scripts, so be prepared to see a comment on everyone. I vaguely remember, I think he scored us on our handwriting as well. That's old school university undergraduate, but yeah, we don't do that.
No, we don't. I mean,
it wouldn't be how we would, most of us type.
I don't handwriting stuff. There's a lot of issues around accessibility and everything anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But one of the things that kind of in the same vein as this is that, like, when we're thinking about writing anything, I mean, I tend to do this a lot with students, like the feedback that I give on an essay, and with exams, it's going to be the exact same, but we don't really do exams, so I don't have to do that anymore. But it's that, like, I do have a bit of like a moral, ethical quandary almost. I don't teach you how to write. I don't teach you writing skills, right? I teach you the content. I teach you how to think about the research. I don't teach you how to, this isn't a module. My module isn't a module about academic writing. And therefore we then end up to that point of, is it fair for me to mark you down because your writing skills aren't good? Because I can't, if you were doing, we're doing a psychology paper and you suddenly start to tell me something about physics because it helps you set up a point and you get your physics thing wrong, am I marking you down for that? Well, no, I never taught you physics and like whatever. Is it an example? Does it get the idea across? Yes, fine, let's just continue. And so it's one of those like, if your ability to write clearly is not great, there is that like argument around like, how should we be approaching that?
Yeah, so I think, maybe I need to backtrack a little bit and just so, for a long time I was the learning support tutor here at Coventry, and my area, well, both of our areas, like child development and education, I know you're a little bit broader, but kind of, it's something that I'm very passionate and quite sensitive to, in that and again at Coventry we're very much about kind of getting the best out of students and seeing the full potential of exactly what it is that they can produce. And we do have a lot of students who, for one reason or another, might have reasonable adjustments surrounding their literacy and their language. So I would say that, yeah, when it's not I feel what I said earlier might make me sound like I'm kind of like, marking down sort of like scripts that kind of maybe are written in certain ways. That's not what I was saying. So if anything, we positively mark because, and I tell this to students all the time, because we are trying to see how far we can push a script up the rubric rather than, we don't I think students sometimes have this misconception that we look at a script and we're kind of like -1, -1, start at 100% and then they end up at like 62 or something where they lost these kind of so many marks. That's not what we do. We try and positively mark and see sort of how far up the different boundaries of the rubric we can push things. So we definitely look to see beyond what's written, and we are acutely aware that obviously we have many students who maybe English might not be their first language, they might, phrase grammar slightly differently, all languages have all different wonderful different ways of using grammar and kind of like using words, for example. So I think we are very good here at Coventry for being able to sort of like look beyond that. But I know what you're saying, it's tricky, because at what point are we then almost we're using our own artistic license in a way to kind of look beyond. But I suppose what I was trying to say earlier about the cognitive capacity, I think that's more about when I'm trying to see the excellence in a piece of work, if maybe it's not presented in a particularly clear way, that is just by default going to reduce probably how much I can find all of those positive points. So I suppose it's always worth, if potentially, you have got challenges around literacy and language, either reaching out to us as module leaders or, the Centre for Academic Writing, or Jodie, who's our amazing learning support tutor now, and just, and seeing how possibly you can kind of like rework things. But I didn't want to make it sound like I kind of... I'm a terribly harsh marker.
Everybody gets an F. I mean, this is what... I know in light of what we were doing a couple of episodes ago with the AI, but this is one of the things that I'm kind of trying to champion, is this idea that AI is a really good way to bridge that. And I think going back to the whole thing with exams is that AI can't really be used for exams. A lot of people, when AI first came out, defaulted to everything has to be exams now because that's the only way you can control stuff. I mean, I was doing a talk a couple of weeks ago about assessment design and AI, and I was showing all these different devices you can get to sneak AI into exams. There's a little earring you can get that clips into your ear and it's clear, and it just little messages into your ear. I've only fairly recently...
Sorry, I'm so conscious that we might have people doing exams and they're all going to be like Amazon, like this.
How do you find these? No, I don't. I think, to be honest, I think it might have been like a mock-up of this is something we could do, and I couldn't find anywhere that you could buy anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's one of those like, it's something that we look for. I mean, you can't have headphones in or anything like that. When I only fairly recently learned to drive a couple of years ago, I was just never really interested. And I remember doing my theory, and they were like, turn around, pull your hair up, take your glasses off, I want to see behind your ears to make sure you're not cheating for that. And I've always thought it's really weird that for learning to drive the theory, that they do that, but in exams we don't do anything like that. We don't get students to turn around and check behind their ears. And I was like, wow, that's just like, it felt really extreme, but I was like I kind of get it. Especially because with driving there's a lot more, there's other people's lives on the line as well.
True. Is that also possibly because I vaguely remember there being a spate of cases of people cheating on the theory exam?
So I don't know.
I'm sure that was in the news like either a year or a couple of years ago, and it was along the lines of people having headphones, kind of like, so they might have someone on call, for example, and if they'll just maybe just say out loud, like, and then they'll kind of,
is this?
Oh, I don't know whether or not caravans need mirrors that are this wide, like, kind of, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible. I just always thought it was really interesting. But like, yeah, so the idea of AI being really supportive for this and trying to look at how you can build assessments that can't be answered by an AI, so that students can feel like they can use them for supporting them with like English second language, dyslexia, various different language disorders, and like that's something I think. I mean, we've just come from a talk about AI, and I was speaking to them afterwards, and like, as much as I don't like generative AI, it's not going anywhere, and like it is a valid tool for like bridging that language. When I'm not teaching you in my class this language, I shouldn't be testing you on it. Here are tools that we should be teaching students how to use AI properly, and they can then use that to support that language. And I worry that in exams students are disadvantaged where there are support that you can get for if you sit an exam. You can get scribes and you can get paper that's in more accessible colours and stuff like that, but like, is that enough?
Don't think so. And I think, Jodie and I were only discussing this the other day in relation to somebody that we were supporting, and thinking about kind of like reasonable adjustments, not a university student, someone outside of university. And it was a question of whether or not having extra time and sitting in an isolated room actually was going to balance, give that kind of equitable sort of like environment. And so reasonable adjustments for exams, you can go a bit further in that there is scope for things like visual aids, but getting permission to kind of have visual aids and the way in which they're constructed can be quite complex, because you can't take in information, but you might be able to take in something that helps you structure an answer, because without that you might forget that for each paragraph you're supposed to have your clear point first, and then it's just kind of like a reminder to be able to communicate it effectively. So but that can be quite hard to sort of get kind of approval for as well. So I think you're absolutely right that it definitely potentially does disadvantage certain students. I
think the timescale thing, as my previous university were playing with this, because like here we don't do exams, so it's not a problem, but over there one of the issues was accessibility being identified by it. And if you're sitting an exam and you need an extra half an hour because you've got that as part of, you've got dyslexia and so on, what they were playing around with, I thought was quite interesting, was giving everybody extra time. So I actually ran a module, and one of our approaches was, you have a 1 hour exam, we're going to give you 8 hours to do it. Nobody gets accessibility adjustments for time, because everybody has it. And you would have a couple of students would go, well, I should still get extra time because everybody else got the 8 hours, and we'd fight back and go, okay, we worked with the accessibility team at the university, and they've said that it's fine for us to do this. But it's a case of like, you might have childcare in the morning to deal with, or throughout the day or whatever. This is a standard 9 to 5 work day, it's 8 hours. At some point, you got to spend an hour writing an essay and submit it. And that was kind of like our approach to really stretch out that accessibility. And I thought it was really interesting doing it so that nobody has accessibility adjustments, because everybody already has them.
It's a true inclusive
exactly
approach,
and I think that was a really interesting kind of idea. And again, I think that's something that we should be thinking about, how we can use AI for that in like take-home assessments now, because obviously if we don't use exams then we don't have to worry about that. But I think for students thinking about, especially if you're in college for example, and you're like worried about the exams that you're going to do, and going, oh my god, university exams and stuff like that, like this is something that's being played around with in places. Like if you hate exams, then okay, a little biased, but Coventry doesn't do them, so that's perfect. I mean, the last open day I was speaking to a student, and at the end she was like, I was thinking of going, I'll not name the university, but this other university, and she went, you've sold me, the applicant day, you sold me. I was like, well, what's the big, like, what did it? She was like, one of the main things was no exams, because like the stress that it puts on, the requirement on just raw memory and not really being that fair balance. But if anybody is worried about exams but is thinking of going to a different university, like, that's fine. Like, they are also looking at alternative ways that you can approach exams, but like, again, they're still running those exams, so like, that's still our big push is, well, we just don't have them. You don't even have to worry about how much accessibility they put into them. Here is, you know, we got project-based learning that we're bringing in, which is, you're not even going to be writing like an essay. It's not just cram an essay the night before. It's, you're going to be working on something
like a podcast or an app design. Or...
Exactly. I mean, we've been, so this week we've been doing a project, like a week, where we've been given projects.
Got to road test some of the assignment briefs.
Yeah, so you're in one group where you're doing a fashion portfolio, and I'm in the filmmaking group. And so I've spent all day today, they're giving me a £2,000 camera and like a load of lighting setups, and went, here's a room, here's one of our amazing technicians. The guys were so helpful. They're just like, make a 3-minute movie, and we did it on the dual ethical problem of somebody that's neurotypical and neurodiverse, not really
like double empathy.
Yeah. That's the one. And like, they both have different perspectives and they're both kind of correct for that. So we did a 3-minute video on that, and it's just like, you can't really use ChatGPT or anything to do that for you. If we got AI to do the script for us, it doesn't even matter. It's the process of us like figuring out how do we implement that and like filming it and like,
and that's the portfolio, and
that's what
is it was the same for our fashion brief as well. So it was less about coming out with a capsule collection. So we have a wonderful Annie, she does psychology of fashion. Her whole PhD was on the power of a suit in an interview, and you do better if you wear a suit in an interview because you bolster self-esteem, those kind of things. So tip for the future, wear a suit in interviews. But she told me that it's called a capsule collection, and she's done wonderful drawings for us, which is amazing because we're putting that into our Canva to sort of like show that we've designed this little mini fashion range. But it's the outcome of the brief is not as important exactly how lovely these designs are, because like you said, you could use AI just to come up with and Rachel, one of our lecturers, actually did put it into ChatGPT, and we were like, design us a fashion collection based on the big 5 personality traits, because that's what we're doing, sort of doing ocean as kind of like a personality trait. So we've got kind of like an outfit for extroversion and an outfit for neuroticism, basically, because we're obviously psychologists and we can't get away from psychology. Oh gosh, what was I saying? But yeah, it's not about the actual product at the end. It's about us kind of evidencing our process. So we've had to go around all the labs and find textiles that we could work with and show pictures of us sort of like playing with it and testing it, and then the research that we've done and gone away and sort of said, well, okay, but this isn't sustainable, how can we use a different one to sort of like fit with the brief and stuff like that. And you document the process of it in a sketchbook, which is in a whole project, which is basically what makes that kind of project-based approach different. So for psychology, exactly, when we do things like making a podcast, we also want to see your thought process. So kind of like, how did you come up with the idea for the podcast? Where's the research that you've done for your script? What things did you need to think about in terms of like your audience and X, Y, and Z? And you kind of bring that all together, and we go through it from weeks 1 to 6 essentially, then you submit in week 7. But it means that we can do some really interesting things that are really applied and authentic as well. So one of the things that we have on Psychology with Education is essentially designing an app for kids and parents and carers that is educational. But as part of designing the app, yes, we're not going to get you to necessarily program an app, because that would take
a long time. I mean, you can vibe code it nowadays.
There's probably ways of doing it, and certainly I've been in talks about incorporating it into a course hour where I actually do want us to produce an app, but I'm going to do it over a year, not just 6 weeks.
And it's not graded.
Exactly, so it'll be more for fun. But in that 6-week block, what I'd like students to do is do the research to say what is it that parents and carers need in terms of apps to support them. What research evidence is there to say that it's very effective to have, like, I don't know, phonics presented in a certain way, and then how would you then design the app, what would it look like, and you can do all the fun creative bit as well. And certainly there probably will be elements of AI in that, you know, not everyone's going to be an artist, so some people might use AI tools to actually kind of come up with the visual of what the app might look like, for example. But it's the whole process and how it kind of like all comes together, which is sort of being graded. And yeah.
So screw exams, I think, is our message.
Well, yeah, I thought maybe it'd be nice to sort of end on, I guess, any kind of take-home messages of what we can, what our viewers can do if they're doing exams right now.
I think start early. Don't cram the day before. I know that was your tactic, but don't.
It wasn't just the day before. Like, I had learned.
Don't cram 2 days before. Like, start early. I think learning is a process that takes time.
Yes.
Like, my area is like cognitive neuro educational. I don't do children's stuff. Sorry,
I keep calling you Dev Ed, and like, sorry, it's because someone's going to bring you over to the Dev Ed.
My PhD was originally we were going to take. I was designing an intervention. We were going to take it to schools, but COVID hit. And we ran it with university students, and then we're like, it didn't work, so we were like, we can't do the stuff in schools. We did talk about just trying to do it anyway, and I went, I don't feel comfortable going into local schools running an intervention that I know didn't work with these other people. So we didn't do it, so I ended up moving away. I was originally going to go to schools, but I consider myself more of like a higher educational psych stuff, to be honest.
Well, sorry, this is going off topic, but we teach development across the lifespan and
we do, and it fits into it.
Yeah.
But like, it is what it is. But like, the core is still the same there. Right? Learning doesn't change because of age, and it's that like you've got to invest time in a moderated way. Cramming as much as you can in a couple of days is significantly less efficient than doing a little bit over time. And it helps to bring down anxiety, and it helps to like build that pace. And it's about healthy habits, right? It's like, you know, we say you should go out and you should do a bit of exercise and walking or whatever each day. You should do a bit of this each day. You should do a bit of that each day. Get your five a day veggies and drink water. But it should also be, and read a paper, like do a couple of pages of a book or whatever, and then that builds up, because that's how, like, you'd be surprised how quickly it accumulates. I mean, I mentioned earlier I finished my PhD early because from day one I was writing, and after 2.5 years I went, I've written 350 pages because I was just doing like a page a day basically.
That's amazing.
And like, it just comes together, and then you just spend like a little bit of time wrapping it up at that end, and you can spend, you know, the last week before the exam going, right, I've covered everything over the past 5 weeks. I've covered everything. Now my task for the last week is to just like blitz through, ask myself questions, test myself on this stuff, and like bring it all together essentially. I said, that's my advice, is pace yourself.
That's really good advice. I think my advice is going to not go against that. Okay.
Cram. Don't revise the week before.
No, I think what I would say is it's more of an add-on than it is kind of like going against it. I think my advice would be, don't be too harsh on yourself if it is a case that you are a bit of a crammer. I think that there are lots of types, and I know that there are lots of types of learners. For me, I do probably find it harder to do little bits. I did do my PhD over 5 years, partly because I went on maternity leave, but also probably partly because I put off most of the writing until sort of like...
It's not a race either.
Exactly. But I just think that sometimes people do things differently, and I think maybe my best advice probably would be to try and I think this is a bit wishy-washy in a way, but find the strategies that work for you, because you will probably have so many different people saying this is what works, or this can work, or do X, Y, and Z. But ultimately, they're probably going to have that. You know, they're out there as popular ideas because they worked for somebody specifically first. maybe not necessarily going to be working for you. So it's kind of about identifying what is good in terms of being effective for you, but also I think just not being too harsh on yourself if you find that you do find it a bit painful to have to approach things for weeks and weeks before, and actually you find that you can hyper focus and concentrate for the few days before better with the pressure of the deadline. We know that anxiety can be bad for memory, hippocampus. Cortisol eats away at the hippocampus. We'll go on and on about that sort of during our teaching. But also we know that anxiety actually to a certain point can be good for performance. Think of like the Yerkes-Dodson kind of like curve, and kind of, yes, it's obviously we talk about it more, we tend to talk about it in relation to sort of like sports performance and those kind of things. So physically it can be, a little bit of anxiety can be good, but it's also true for things like academic performance if it's only to a certain extent, and everyone's got different thresholds, and certainly when it becomes overwhelming, that's when it kind of becomes a hindrance. But I think it's not a bad thing to feel a little bit of butterflies in the stomach, and a little bit wobbly and a little bit nervous, because that is just the adrenaline which you essentially need to kind of sort of like power you through. So I think just don't try and hyper focus on not being anxious in a way, I suppose. I think sometimes trying to avoid anxiety can just make you more anxious. But yeah, I suppose we're with you if you are someone that does experience a lot of anxiety, because like you said, around mass anxiety, it is something that can be really tough for some individuals. I would know, as having a panic disorder, I am probably the queen of what adrenaline does to a person's like body, but like so it can be a really significant challenge. But yeah.
I mean, you mentioned this curve, so anybody that doesn't know, the idea of like anxiety and like stress is like an upside down U curve, where the more stress you have, the more like engagement you have essentially. So when you've got no stress at all, you're at the low end of that scale, you don't care, you're not going to do anything, you're not engaged, because it's such a non-thing. There's all sorts of different things that we have in our life that you just don't really care about it, you don't think about it, you don't do it. And then as stress slightly goes up, you then start to go, oh, I should do this, oh, I should do this, oh, I should really do this. And then you get to the point you go, oh my God, I've got to do this. And then you start going down, oh my God, I can't face this, oh my God, this is terrible. And then you get to that point where you're not doing anything because you're like paralysed by that fear and the stress and anxiety. And so there is that balance, having some anxieties.
It's like an optimal level, isn't there? I'm envisioning we could probably have, like, again, if Alex does it in the editing, will we have a visual of the Yerkes-Dodson?
Oh no.
Going up.
Editor Alex is on leave tomorrow. He's going to be doing this.
True.
So we'll
Maybe
see.
Not.
I'll see. I'll probably pull up a picture from Wikipedia or something.
Yeah, we could just do a post on it and explain it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so it's optimal to a certain point, but then it kind of can be a little bit problematic, and there's a lot of individual differences in the ability to cope with stress as well. What about? Sorry, I know that we probably ought to wrap this up, but memory and memorisation. Do we have any tips on kind of
diversify your approach? I know there's a lot of, so there's old research around having like learning styles. I'm a visual learner, I'm a kinesthetic learner. Complete rubbish.
Yeah, agree. I'm glad you said that.
Decades ago.
Yeah.
The closest thing to it is if there's something that you like, you're more likely to engage in it. But if you engage in stuff, even if it's not your learning style, you still learn just as well from it. So I think diversifying it keeps it interesting. And a lot of like the core mechanical learning rules are around like exposure and linking information. So there's this idea that like just repeating information, exposure causes you to learn really, really well. It doesn't. There's lots of examples. Right now, don't look. Which way does the queen, or if you've got a new coin, which way does the king face on a 50p coin? Left or right? You don't know. And like the reality is, you've probably seen coins.
I think it's right.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head either. Right, that's the reality. Google it. Anybody watching this, Google this and check. But like, you might remember it, but most people don't. And so it's one of those things that just seeing something doesn't mean you're learning it. You got to put that effort into it, and diversifying it, link that information to other stuff. Something that you already know, that's already solid, If you can link a new piece of information to something you already know, that's already got a foundation to build off of. And that, as part of long-term potentiation and the biomechanical aspect of learning, is facilitated by already utilising what you already have. And so diversifying the approaches that you take increases the likelihood that you can just quickly hook onto something that you've got already, because it's just a way that you think about or you do something. Practical skills, practical application, and linking stuff in different ways is...
And when we say diversified, do we mean like having it visually represented, also having like a mind map of it, also having like play it to yourself in a recording?
If you can find a level on Roblox that teaches you chemistry, play the level on Roblox. I had students playing Roblox in one of my classes a while ago, and it's a case of if it's relevant, like, you're still awake, you're paying attention, you're learning, you're doing something. Like, I've spoken to loads of people that have kids, and they're like, my kids have learned this, that, and the other from this video game. If you can do something that engages you, even if you're playing Call of Duty tonight with your mates, well, get on voice with them and talk to them about what you've got your exam on.
Yes.
Whilst you're playing Call of Duty.
That's such a good idea.
You're still playing games, but you're also revising because you're talking about it, and you're doing this learning and the scaffolding approach. We often discount the idea that you're doing hobbies that aren't educational, but you can't link something to it. Like, ask your mate, whilst we're playing our game tonight or whatever, can I just ask you a quick question about this thing that we covered last week in class? Chat about it for half an hour, go back to killing zombies or whatever you're doing. You've still done something. It still counts. Anything that you do still counts.
That's really, really good. And I think, if you can almost do any of those kind of peer-assisted learning type things where if you've got a younger sibling, try and teach them, for example. Teach a parent or carer or adult you've got at home, like, tell them that they owe you time to listen to, kind of like...
Pester them.
Yeah. I was going to say something else, like sleep is another one. So I used to... When I was at the again, not going to name the university because I did my undergraduate at a slightly different university, but we did have a sleep lab. So we had quite a fancy big sleep lab, but only because we tend to find that different universities might focus on a certain topic of research. They're known for doing a certain thing. So my old undergraduate university was known for doing sleep research, hence they had like a big sleep lab. And a lot of the research and the studies that came out of that was around the consolidation of learning. So a lot of your learning consolidation, well, all of it pretty much, takes place during the time that you're sleeping. So it's really good if you can revise, again, do it sort of like in a block where you know that you're going to sort of like maybe stop at kind of like 9 o'clock, give yourself a little bit of time to sort of like wind down, but then know that you're going to spend that evening, basically your brain is going to kind of, as it's sleeping, put all those little kind of like blocks of information into kind of like your long-term memory. So getting that kind of good night's sleep, if you can, is important. And I suppose that might be an argument for not trying to cram it all the nights before, because if you're for any reason anxious and you don't sleep well, it's not necessarily going to be as encoded as it could be if you've been doing it in chunks sort of like earlier in the week.
Stage 4 sleep that's best?
Possibly. I'm not a sleep researcher, but yeah.
Sleep goes in different stages. So the first stage is where you're starting to lose consciousness, but you're not really asleep. Stage 2 is NREM, so that's where your eyes aren't moving. Something that people always mistake is that REM sleep, when your eyes are moving, is when you're dreaming. You dream in NREM as well. I think, off the top of my head, the kind of dreams you have can be kind of thematically different in NREM and REM, but you do dream in NREM. I think it's just maybe a bit more vivid in REM. I'm not a sleep expert, so I can't say for sure. But I think it's in REM sleep that consolidation happens best. And so, like, it's not necessarily just sleep, but make sure you get good quality sleep. Sleep hygiene's really important. Don't play around on your phone before bed. I have a nightmare for this. I'll be looking at memes on Instagram all night, and then I turn it off and I want to sleep, and it takes me like half an hour to drift off because I've just been having this bright blue light blasting in my eyes. So yeah, sleep.
And then I think the one last thing I'll say is, and this is more of a social and emotional kind of take on it, I suppose. Again, we're psychologists, we think about all these different levels. This is only a very short period in your life. I remember at the time thinking that it was painfully long, that it was taking me away from doing everything I wanted to do. I did not want to be sat revising. I would much rather have been at the time watching TV or doing whatever it was, kind of, and like you said, like there's the drag of the pull of things like social media, like so checking out your socials, seeing friends, doing all these different things. You are going to have to deny yourself some of these things to be able to focus on revising, but it really is such a short part of your life. It feels like yesterday I was cramming for my exams, and like I'm going to come back to the fact that I'm nearly 40. It wasn't. It was like 25 years ago, and it has gone so quick because so many other important and wonderful and sometimes not so wonderful things have happened in my lifespan. But really, that was such a small fraction of time. And if you can just knuckle down and focus as much as possible, it will be over so quickly. So yeah,
I mean, there's 52 weeks in a year, and if we're saying revise ahead of time, let's say you revise like 6 or 7 weeks ahead of time, that's still 45 weeks of the year that we're saying don't bother revising. Do your homework if you get homework, but don't feel like you have to cram or anything in those weeks. It's like a tenth of the year at most that we're like, you want to get like that far ahead, basically. So like, just remember that whilst it's for the next 4 or 5 weeks that you have to do this, well, all of the weeks that you've had before you where you've not had to do that are things that you also need to like conceptualize existed, they happened, and you gotta push that like against each other, compare them. So yeah. Okay, I think we've probably done an extra long one today. Probably. We talked for ages. We talked about the podcast news, the new name.
Yes.
So thank you very much for watching, everybody. Next episode, we said we're going to be talking about music festivals and music identity, and might dress up a little bit. If we do it here, if we do it there, we'll already probably be dressed up.
We're debating whether or not to stream partly live from download, which we think could be quite...
That could be cool.
It would be... No, not live. What am I talking about?
I was going to say live. Oh my god. I'm going to say somebody's going to walk past, like drop out the head and say something.
We're not going to do live. Probably. And then
We'll record something.
We'll record something, potentially, I think, maybe, if we can. And even if... Because we don't know whether or not we're going to be able to meet up, so it might be that we just have separate little things that we clip in from our tents. Me tent, Alex... Glamping.
In a real bed that somebody else put up for me.
Alex doesn't build his own tent.
I don't build my own tent.
So there'll be a stark difference in our experiences, and we'll see how that goes, especially if it's like raining and I'm miserable in mine. So yeah,
I mean,
cool.
My tent that I will have put up for me will also get rained on if yours gets rained on.
True, but yeah, I'm just expecting like, is it like a canvas bell tent?
Yeah, it's a bell tent.
Pretty thick, pretty comfortable.
It's got a carpet in it, like a rattan carpet, I think it is.
And a real bed.
And a real bed with like a duvet and a mattress and butler that comes and brings me breakfast and everything. I don't have a butler. That's my wife.
Is that your wife?
No,
she's going to watch this and be like,
she'll kick me for that one. But yeah, so I think we'll do something like that. Okay, let's leave that there. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you for the next one. Oh.